The mysterious case of the vanishing pistol.
Say you don't mean it!
Someone locates it in the moments between you bringing Mr. Doyle to the doctor and your return.
The bone's shattered. We need a hospital.
And then presumably uses it to commit the murder of Lynette Doyle and part two lovers forever.
People love a great puzzle. I think they love that brain stimulation of the sorting out of clue and character. I think it's fun. And if that gets tied up to primal passion, then I think you have a winning formula. So I think it's just an endless stimulation for the brain, an endless provocation for the heart.
I was exposed to Agatha Christie too young when my parents brought home an early VHS copy of a film called Death on the Nile. And as a young boy, I watched it on the floor at my parents' feet, and it scared me so badly. This family legend goes that I wouldn't sleep in my own room unattended for 2 years. So this is revenge. It was the first film I ever saw where the idea of humans going out of their way to harm another human for their own gain was made possible. I didn't know about murder. And here I was watching a film where murder is committed brilliantly, and it just scared me so badly that people would do this.
The script of Death on the Nile, of course, is written by Michael Green, who wrote the script of Orient Express. And I think what we liked in Orient Express, and it's the same with Death on the Nile, that the plot and the story and most of all the atmosphere of a real Agatha Christie is recreated on the screen. And I know I'm biased, but I think for the audience that is tremendously important, that they actually feel when they leave the theatre that they've not only seen a wonderful, modern and highly photogenic film, but they've also experienced an evening of Agatha Christie. And I think that's the acid test that we make when we first read a script or at the end of the day see a film. Is this a real Agatha Christie? And Michael Green gets 10 out of 10 for that.
Ken and I were filming Murder on the Orient Express and having a good time doing it and thinking, wouldn't it be great if this was successful enough that we got to make another one? And if we were, what other one should that be? And we each laid out some of our favorites, but we just kept circling back and back to the Nile.
And back, please! Make way for Miss Ridgway!
Death on the Nile is about Lynette Ridgway, a wealthy socialite's attraction to Simon Doyle, a man who previously has been passionately entwined with an equally beautiful woman, Jacqueline de Belfort. He rejects one, he embraces the other. A wedding party ensues where a group of very exotic and amazing people who claim to be their friends surround them. And in the middle of this, the karma that has been produced when one woman steals another woman's man, fireworks ensue. In this case, they ensue under the beautiful Egyptian skies, across the desert and down the mighty Nile itself. So a human love triangle that goes bad is the sort of rotten fruit at the center of this murderous holiday. And Hercule Poirot, the great Belgian detective, Agatha Christie's most beloved and famous creation, finds himself once again in an exotic location, facing sex and death, and trying to partake of neither.
Are you married, Mr. Poirot?
I have my cases. I have my books.
Ah.
Action!
Poirot is just an amazing character because he just arrives when needed, and his mystery-solving abilities are like a superpower. He always gets it right.
Ah! I was sure Book was fibbing when he said he knew the Hercule Poirot.
Oh, that's the man.
My congratulations and my gratitude, madame.
Merci.
Poirot was one of the relatively few great detectives of the Golden Age who travelled abroad extensively. Most of his fictional compatriots in the detective world were solving murders based in the UK or in the US. So when he solved a murder on the Orient Express or a death on the Nile, this was very, very exotic.
You're quite the most ludicrous man I have ever seen.
Not the first time I've heard this.
And you're in my view.
Stepping aside.
He's obviously a very unusual man. That's how My grandmother invented him.
A man capable of being irritated about where 7 small cakes are placed instead of 6.
There are 7.
Indeed, 7 of the very finest, sir.
I cannot have the uneven number. Which should I take away? I do not know. No, not my little friend, please. Thank you so much.
And who can be absolutely forensic when it comes to investigating anything and anyone and be ruthless with them.
Enough.
Enough indeed. I am now prepared to present the conclusions of my other, more secret case.
As a detective, having a presentation that throws people is actually quite useful. As soon as someone meets him and he is interviewing them, they're automatically put on their back foot because there's a very strange man asking me personal questions and I can't stop staring at that thing.
There are many fine detectives. Well, that is not true. There are many average detectives. But to be what I am, it requires fixedness of mind, the little gray cells pampered, indulged, given all the oxygen in my blood and minutes on my clock.
Although he's very clever and very conceited and all those sort of things, he has to be human as well, and he has to empathize with the people who he's investigating, and I think Ken does that very well.
I bore witness to a small drama some weeks ago. Clearly, I caught only the first act.
I love Ken as Poirot. He's one of the great actors of his generation. It makes me incredibly proud that, you know, people like Ken want to play Poirot.
Where have you been? The Arundel mystery. Are you with Case?
No, I am with Hunger.
One of the things about both these pictures, Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, is that they have had a chance to be subject to a kind of personal makeover by our ability to talk with the Agatha Christie estate and Matthew Pritchard and James Pritchard, relatives of Agatha Christie, to talk a little bit about her personal attitude towards these stories.
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a, Poirot? Nous attaquons maintenant. Maintenant? Oui. Je ne me trompe pas.
Poirot's character isn't really explored in the books. I mean, there's very little backstory that is explained properly. So, to some extent, I think adapters have a license to think back to what Poirot might have been and why he might have a moustache and why he might be the person he is and why is he a bachelor? Did he have love that failed? Did something go wrong? What is it behind him?
Poirot is such an interesting, odd creature because he's this collection of habits tightly wound like an overspun watch, and that everything is held together so carefully that you're wondering what is it underneath that he's scared is going to unspool. And that led us to just an idea of what was the tragedy that he couldn't get past. Given his age, he probably would have fought in the First Great War, and there were some very harrowing things someone had to experience. We love the idea of him having a commander who impressed on him at a young age and who saw that there's a young corporal in his troop that everyone else might look at and think, that's a weirdo, we should avoid him. But his captain knows, you know what? When young Poirot speaks, it's worth paying attention because he sees things other people don't.
Vous avez l'esprit bien trop aiguisé pour un fermier, Poirot. Non, capitaine!
My great-grandmother doesn't really put a backstory in there, and I think it's quite fun to do it. I think as a fan, I enjoy different people's interpretations, and I think what Michael does here is perfectly kind and respectful to both Poirot and my great-grandmother.
Yes, it's not to come.
I wanted to.
Young Poirot was in love. He thought, like a lot of people of his age and time, he would marry the woman he loved and have a quiet life as a farmer in the country.
As the story of other people's obsessive love is mirrored to him right across the whole of the picture, we have a chance to find out what happened in the love life of Hercule Poirot.
I love you.
What about this?
Simple. Grow a moustache.
Of course, that extremity of emotion, although it's seductive and romantic and it's very intoxicating as an idea, we can also be at our most jealous, our most resentful, our most hateful. It's an obsessive state. And Poirot reveals in Death on the Nile that he's as susceptible to it as others.
I thought Poirot was impervious to love's fever.
I was sick with it once. It left me with enough regret for a lifetime.
But he has learnt through pain that there may be another way.
After Catherine, I became whatever it is I am now.
He lost his love, and he metastasized into something really strange. A detective, the world's greatest detective, and a very fussy one at that.
Some of what might have gone into his obsessive love affairs instead goes into the arrangement of his clothes, the perfection of his moustache, the amount of oil in hair. He is a carefully constructed series of masks, and this film particularly, I think, uncovers that.
Whoever she was must have done a number on you. That mask covers your whole face, doesn't it?
Ken and I met a few times and talked about just hopes and dreams and wishes for what would be wonderful to put in the script. What are the themes that we really enjoyed? We just kept coming back to passion and love and romance and really just digging that out and making sure all of our characters really had something to say about that. And of course, one of the best days is when I got to give a finished draft to Ken and him reading it and saying, well, this is worth filming. So that's always a good part in your career day.
Michael Green has rehumanized these stories so that you get action, you get the travelogue, you get the aspirational trip. I hope in the difficult times that we've been living through over the last year or so, that a trip down the Nile, jumping into the ancient, majestic splendor of Egypt is going to be something that is fun for people.
I have immortal longings in me.
In Death on the Nile, the group of the main suspects is down to 9, and that little internal trim that Michael did with the blessing of the Agatha Christie estate was, I think, vital to allowing him to let those characters breathe. Everything about the movie, per Michael's shift, is younger, sexier, more youthful.
Probably our biggest liberty we've taken with the novel to the adaptation to screen is that all of our suspects are part of the wedding party, and all of them were invited because they have a direct relationship to our first victim, Lynette Ridgway. That gave us a lot of opportunity because we didn't have to discover that everyone secretly knew the victim, but rather, as soon as the body's found, we know all of these people knew her and might have had a motive. So now it's about Poirot going out and finding out what might that motive have been.
You accuse me now of murder.
Oh no, he accuses everyone of murder.
It is a problem, I admit. Because of the extraordinarily supportive and personalized nature of the response to our film of Murder on the Orient Express, we felt that we could listen to people, and we did, and in this case, bring back a character like Book, played by Tom Bateman.
With your hobbies, you will never amount to anything. God, I hope so.
Who is the right-hand man to Poirot as he was during the investigation of the murder on the Orient Express.
Poirot! Book! What are you doing here? Poirot, it is good to see you. Are you on an exotic holiday or an exotic case?
Cases, I am in hiding from cases.
There were a few versions of the script in Murder on the Orient Express where they mined Book and Poirot's relationship quite heavily, but it was too much, basically, for the film. The film wasn't about that. But with this film, because it's all about love in its different forms, be that mother-son, girlfriend-boyfriend, there's also the love between Poirot and Book, a friendship, and they've really mined it, and they've taken, I think, scenes that we lost in the first film, they've managed to change and replicate in this film.
I was and have been on a case.
What case?
You.
It's a change from the novel, but it's in the spirit of Agatha Christie. It puts Poirot in league with one of the sort of famous duos with which he usually goes into battle in these stories. And from a movie point of view, I think the audience that so loved Tom Bateman's performance as Book, he's funny and he's charming and he is apparently hapless, but he turns out to have quite a lot of get up and go and vim and vigor, and we see that in operation here, and he's very critically involved in the resolution of the story.
You could never understand what people will do for love.
This is Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot, and I think the great thing, it's like Shakespeare and Hamlet. Poirot is now a world-famous character, and he can be adapted in many different ways, and that to me is a good thing, not a bad thing.
I love to talk an audience. I am vain, you see. I love people to hear me bring the solution to a crime and say, see how clever is Hercule Poirot.
What we had the opportunity to do here is to take all the things we know and love about Poirot and maybe add a tiny little bit of our own. So if the things we've added to Poirot end up being part of the canon, people understand him in a new way, we'll feel like we've done something and honored our time with him.
Although they're in exotic locations, although they involve large ensemble casts, we feel that they are personal, human, often quite domestic stories. They happen to be played out against epic backdrops, but that human dimension mixed with the epic is always something that I adore. And it's great when you have collaborators who know it intuitively, Agatha Christie in this case, and Michael Green, a screenwriter who seizes that and runs with it. And it becomes a proper packed character experience of a great whodunit.
People kill for love.
Simon, what's the scam here? I thought we were sightseeing today.
With these films, we feel like we're privileged to be able to be part of the tour guide department that brings a cinematic audience to exotic places through the imagination of Agatha Christie. So it's not necessarily absolutely what you'd see in every detail in Egypt, but the impression is strongly that. And so we never take for granted that that's an exciting thing to do, and we need to create that excitement.
As soon as you can on those guys.
There is a real place called the Cataract Hotel, and in fact, it existed in the 1930s. Agatha Christie stayed there and is reputed to have begun writing Death on the Nile in the Cataract Hotel. So there's a good bit of research involved there, although obviously it's now been greatly modernized. And so we didn't copy it. We used the name, and I used an amalgamation of various styles of architecture from Egypt in the 1930s, and we built our own composite set specifically for the requirements of the script, being the Doyle's wedding, the wedding party, and the first arrival in Egypt.
Death on the Nile is the most unsettled of Agatha Christie's books. She presents a veneer of sophistication, sexiness, glamour, and romance, but it is at all times brittle, fragile, dangerous, sharp, disruptive and disrupted.
She's followed us again.
And once again, as she does with so many of her stories, she places her characters under the pressure of being in a claustrophobic environment, putting them, if you like, in a very, very beautiful cage, a gilded cage. There couldn't be anything more beautiful than the Karnak as designed by Jim Clay in this film. But all of the champagne and the beautiful crystal and the gorgeous linen and the wonderful food is tasted in an atmosphere that unsettles. So this edginess, this danger, this sense that lust will turn into something darker means that hatred and murder are never far from the center of things.
Just tell me what it costs to get her away from me. Name a price. I'll buy the whole damn boat if I have to.
When it came to building the Karnak, we knew we'd created such a wonderful piece of design from Jim Clay and his team that I simply didn't want our cast to see it until we were due to shoot on it, a minute or two later.
3, 2, 1, action.
When you see that cast of characters, those 10 or 12 actors getting onto the boat, it is with a childlike joy, a Christmas morning kind of joy and wonder at the scale of it. So the choice to delay it until they could see it for the first time and we could capture that feeling as it happened was a key part of how we planned things.
I didn't see anything until the very first day we shot on the Karnak, and I could not believe they actually built the real boat. And when you go inside of the boat, they took it to the next level. Everything to the tiniest detail.
Well done!
And then Jim Clay came to us and introduced himself, and I asked him, how long did it take to build the boat? And he said, nearly a year. It took nearly a year to build one set piece.
We began by obviously researching real boats. We researched the Thomas Cook fleet. There are 3 or 4 boats working in that fleet at the time, and then designed our own. Ken had specific requirements about how the boat should look. He wanted it to feel rather threatening and sleek and shark-like because these waters of the Nile were dangerous, especially in our particular case. So we adapted the shape of the hull
And then the real boats have something like, I think, anywhere between 40 and 50 cabins. Well, obviously we're relieved of that requirement, so we were able to use that space for double height, mezzanine levels, more flexible space, and that's what we did to make it more film friendly.
Jim Clay had created the actual boat with all these interiors and cabins and details and stuff, and the prop department put like food and like everything. It felt like real. It felt like you could inhabit it, to the point where it was sort of a mystery when you couldn't flush a toilet, because no one plumbs a pretend boat. And sadly, I found that out too late.
I want these served at my funeral.
I was sitting on a boat yesterday doing a scene, and I could feel the engine of what feels like the boat. But the boat isn't going anywhere, I haven't got an engine. So I don't know what that is. It must be a generator or something like that. But there are moments when I genuinely believe we're on a boat and we are moving along the Nile. It's as simple as that.
The best experience of Agatha Christie for me is when I want to be in the novel, despite the fact that everyone keeps dying. And that's what Jim Clay does. He puts us in a world that you're like, for a vacation that beautiful, I don't care that there's a 30% chance I'll be murdered. I just want to sleep in that bedroom.
Oh, God.
They built this boat and the temple at Abu Simbel. They just built it. So if you want to see it, you don't have to go to Egypt or a museum. You can go to Long Cross Studios and it's there. And it looks just like it.
Cut, thank you.
Being an Agatha Christie fan myself, I feel that Ken and everybody involved have absolutely been able to nail the decadence of her world.
There are various symbols of the glamour.
Oh, wow.
And in this amazing Tiffany necklace, you get something that is iconic.
Oh my God, this is heavy.
It's a beautifully done, timeless classic of a piece that just says ownership, sort of supremacy, a deep classiness.
Very Lynette, right?
If you happen to have the odd million knocking about.
All right, off I go.
Everybody looks amazing. It's the detail. I mean, I'm so not used to this kind of lavish detail with makeup, hair, costume.
The colours, like my nails were matched to the buttons on my dress at one point. I mean, it's literally like the tiniest little details.
I have one final interview to conduct.
You can't talk about Poirot without talking about the mustache. We've decided to go very illustrious, as one should. He is described as having the most magnificent mustaches in all Europe. That's saying something, because in Europe, there are some magnificent mustaches. So you have to make yours the most.
First, I think we tried different sizes, different color, different shape. We made 9 different kind of mustache until we get to the hero one. So the journey was quite long.
I did actually wear the moustache once, and it was the most uncomfortable thing I have ever had to do. So I have incredible respect for him. However many days on set, wearing that underneath your nose cannot be a lot of fun.
Paco, our costume designer, had done amazing work on everyone's costumes. It's so rich and real.
You get that effortless glamour in the clothes that makes you feel good just by watching some people walk in these things.
Ken wanted to do a movie that didn't look like a reproduction of the fashion of the time, taking a much more contemporary approach on the period.
The great costume designers give you the character by the way that they dress you. Paco very much listens and asks as we're doing a fitting. He say, what do you think? Should it be this? Should it be that?
Normally what I would do with the actors is I have a first fitting where I put all my ideas together.
You would start off with just the materials, really, and then he would add colors and add textures and layers and patterns and prints.
The things he's made for this film are extraordinary. These fabulous materials.
Paco's done a bloody good job, from soup to nuts, from toes to top. And I know they've made everything from scratch, right down to these little socks. I'm wearing 2 pairs of socks. That's just part of my character. He's a complex guy. Who knows? Did he murder? Didn't he murder?
What do you want me to say? Don't I know I'm ridiculous?
The thing that got us excited about shooting large formats film is the fact that it is an ensemble cast. So there's many great actors, and we wanted to have the opportunity to shoot them all in a single shot, but really feel their presence without the need of extreme close-ups. I feel that large format photography is a very immersive form of filmmaking.
Pushing this forward brings everyone closer for the shot.
There are only 4 cameras available in the world from Panavision. They're very temperamental machines. It's like driving a 1950s Ferrari. You need to tinker with it all the time. Incredibly beautifully made and engineered, but it is of a certain age and there are no replacement parts. It's a classic process in a way.
In 70mm and on film, the depth, the detail, the image size, that's exciting to me. For me, the escapism, the transportation is so total. It's a wonderful, immersive, illusory experience. Whether you're in the Cataract Hotel in Aswan, or the Great Temple of Abu Simbel, or the Karnak, you get scale, style, suspense, danger, and magnificence.
And as beautiful as the boat is outside, I think you'll agree that the inside of the boat is even more beautiful. And we've actually got permission to show you inside Poirot's cabin himself. So, Jen, what do you...
No, we're not stealing anything. Don't spread that room.
Jennifer, you've got one of those.
Well, you see, the thing is, this is just going to be trashed on. This is going to trash the whole thing.
Where did you even get the chisel?
Because some of this isn't even plumbed in. You can just lift it out.
Stealing it.
All right.
It's just very strong
leave them in my trailer. Thank you. Cut that out.
I can't shift it. I can't You're still doing here. No way.
Out. By private work going on, private things.
This effectively is a clean POV, and then we would do, I think, that.
Good, these are nice.
Ken Branagh loves cinema, and the idea of making a big 70mm version of these Agatha Christie stories is very appealing to him. And I think he's a natural for it.
He's like a surgeon. He's so prepared and organized.
Ken also has a really nice twinkle in his eye, which is something I think it's nice to see in a character like Poirot.
I've never worked with an actor-director before, but Kenneth Branagh occupies a unique cultural space anyway, and it's something he does rather gracefully.
He gave us this huge reveal. We all arrived at this hotel lobby that they built, which was just stunningly beautiful. Each and every one of us had this sort of moment.
I suppose being a director is about creating an imaginary world and inviting other people to inhabit it, and that process began like right at the read-through.
Thanks, everybody. This is very exciting. Very exciting, and now we're in the scary room with the big white table. All is well. I love watching actors I admire, and I love working with actors I admire, and in Death on the Nile I get to do both. So thank you very much, everybody, for saying yes.
To have a room which just the actors, Ken and about 3 other people, just concentrating, and he said, let's all go for it. Let's do a performance. Let's not just mumble the words. But, this is a good start.
Read-throughs. Okay. Often a traumatic swim through a sea of inaudible mumbling, when our first day at school terror has us going on the defensive. Think of this not as an ordeal to endure, but a one-off rehearsal to enjoy.
That really set the tone for the project, and it was like literally seeing the movie coming alive around the table.
Round of applause for us!
There are a lot of advantages to having your movie directed by Ken Branagh. First of all, he's very, very good at directing. Second of all, there are very few people who are as open and generous with their time and attention and their trust, which are the things that are most expensive to a director, and even more expensive to a director who is in the film in every scene.
Okay, all right, I think we'll stay with this, you're right.
Sir Kenneth Branagh, he has so much understanding about what it means to be the performer. And the fact that he can wear both hats, for me as an actress who works for him, made me feel so much more comfortable and safe, because he truly gets me.
It's to just do it that way, for performance,
and then break it.
This was the first time that I was ever acting opposite the director of a project that I'm in, and so it added to the nervousness of the character in the scene.
Did you go anywhere else? See or hear anything else?
Forgive me, sir. character, kind of feeding off the jitters that were genuine because, you know, you want to impress the director of the project that you're on.
We'll cut that.
I love the way that Ken approaches the work, giving us a lot, but also allowing us to explore, have fun. But he's very organized, so within all of this play, there's a real structure to what's happening and everything around us, so it feels very secure.
We need to do one more, thank you.
Ken is very prepared. He absolutely knows what he's expecting of you, and he's got lots of questions, so you better have read the script. He's also really open to suggestions.
Well done. We're going to do a pickup, thank you very much. I think we should go one lens tighter, sir. Should we go to the 100? Of course.
There's some days where he's not playing his character, so he's just at the monitor.
And cut. Get there.
And then the days when he is his character, his suit hasn't got one bit of marks or dirt or debris. His moustache is still in the same exact place. His hair is on point, and he's given notes, and he hits his mark, and he watches back, you know, the playback, gives notes again, and gets back into it. So we're pretty much in awe of him.
Can somebody hold a monitor up for me?
I mean, I don't know how he gets his head around it. I really don't. I mean, it's a huge production.
Poirot and Salome are going to be, then have to be on that side. Oh, that's okay.
Because he gives his 1000%, everyone else has to do the same.
Can you make sure you look at the left?
When he plays Poirot, he can let all of the directing go because he finds refuge in his character. And then as soon as it's cut, he's director again.
I like it.
I truly learned a lot from him, not just from the way that he performs, but also by the way that he directs. He's a good captain.
Thank you very much. That's a wrap.
2020, amazingly enough, is the 100th anniversary of the first published novel of Agatha Christie, and her longevity is amazing, her talent is amazing, and her renewed vigor as a screen storyteller is really remarkable. I see no diminishment in her capacity to charm and terrify audiences, but always to entertain them with fun and with heart, with intelligence and with chills.
Agatha Christie is known as the Queen of Crime, which originally was a publicity. You know, Queen of Crime was on the front of her books and articles in her paperback reprints. And she is Queen of Crime because nobody ever did it for as long, as often, or as well as Agatha Christie. So Queen of Crime is a richly deserved title. Lots of the people who were bestsellers at the time of Agatha Christie are completely forgotten now, but Agatha Christie still sails on serenely, as befits the Queen of Crime.
In terms of Agatha as a person, I mean, I've read her autobiography, and she comes across as nice, happy, always reading, very cultured. But what I always think is, how could one person have had so many brilliant ideas and the potential to write so many great books? I mean, I really do think that she was a proper genius.
Mother, you must meet Hercule Poirot.
Why?
Well, he's only the greatest detective alive.
He exaggerates. No, he's quite correct, actually.
I was lucky because my mom is a great murder mystery reader, and she always had a stack of murder mysteries that were hanging around the house. And this book has a lot of heart, and it can be quite sad, but then it's also really witty, and there's a lot of really crackling dialogue, and I love that about it.
People build towers to love in song and stone, as if cooing over a pair of dark eyes will save them from pain. If anything, it will double it.
I remember reading Death on the Nile sort of slightly after Orient Express, and it's a wonderful story. And I knew my grandparents spent a long time in Iraq and Syria, but a little bit of time in Egypt as well. And I understood how she built her stories around particular venues.
Brushes down, Mother. It's the Temple of Abu's symbol. Ramesses the Great awaits.
She never went to school. She taught herself. She was able to read by the time she was 6. I always tell people that she was the best listener. She much preferred listening to other people, and she much preferred observing characters and how they reacted with each other.
Maybe to fix a broken heart, all it takes is a single bullet.
And she had 73 little notebooks that we still possess, which she used to write little notes down of how people behaved and what habits they had and all that kind of thing.
She was incredibly interested in people and therefore incredibly observant of what they did and how they behaved. And I think she did believe, slightly scarily, that none of us are possibly very far away from committing murder. I know it sounds odd. She thought most people, if the wrong buttons were pressed, could do it. And I think that is, well, it's testament to her observation of human nature and her ability to get that human nature onto a page.
You murder! I will kill you!
By the time that she wrote Death on the Nile, she was well and truly married to her second husband, who was, of course, an archaeologist, Max Mallowan, and that was the story behind her involvement in the Middle East in the first place. So by the time Death on the Nile appears, she is very happy and producing books yearly. But I think to find that she could not only indulge her love of travel with a good slice of work as well was a great surprise to her and a great joy, because it meant that there was, if you'd like to put it this way, an excuse for going to a lot more places.
On the walls of the Queen's burial mastaba, he wrote a poem to her.
I think it's fair to say that Death on the Nile was one of her favourite books. I think she enjoyed the exotic locations. Obviously it came from her travels. It's definitely one of the best stories. I think it's one of the best twists of any story. I think it's one of the most memorable.
My grandmother wrote for entertainment. She didn't have any social agenda or anything like that. Remember, she lived through 2 wars, and I think that the idea of providing entertainment in which people could actually have a beacon in what perhaps otherwise might be slightly fraught times was terribly important to her. And one of the reasons she went on writing until late in life was the fact that I think that she realized that people expected Christie, and it doesn't really matter what language or how old you are, where you live. The longer she goes on, the more popular she becomes.
She was a pioneer. The prolific nature of her output is extraordinary, and her remarkable ability to entertain through a twisting, turning plot, through access to primal human emotion. She's one of the great literary entertainers, and thank God she also has turned into one of the great cinema entertainers.
Travel by water does not naturally agree with me. Oh, I could tell you. Well, I should not tell you.